viewers and learners of the MEVE 001 course, that is Environmental Impact Assessment for Environmental Health. Now we will discuss the potential impacts of a hydroelectric project, which will be a study. I introduce myself as Dr. Sushmitha Baskar, working in the discipline of Environmental Studies at the School of Interdisciplinary and Transdisciplinary Studies, Indira Gandhi National Open University, New Delhi. The learning objectives of this module. After learning to and listening this module, you will be able to explain the potential impacts of a hydroelectric project. Let us now understand the meaning of sustainable development. So, sustainable development means the process of balancing the needs of humans for their economic and social development, along with the need to protect the natural as well as the built environment, so that these needs can be met for the future generations, and it can be met for the present generation, and also the future generations will not be hampered, so that they are also kept for the future generation. You need to keep that in mind. Sustainable development encompasses the following, that includes the environmental sustainability, the economic sustainability, social sustainability as well as political sustainability. Scientific and technological development, so they have reached tremendous heights and resulted in the overexploitation of our precious natural resources and environmental degradation. If we take environmental degradation, which is now occurring at a very fast pace, it is damaging our biosphere as a whole due to the anthropogenic activity. So, man alone is responsible for 90% of the environmental degradation that is occurring. Before 1947, if we have to describe, there were fewer than 300 large dams in India. But by the year 2000, the number had grown to over 4,000, and almost 50% were built between 1971 and 1989. So, in dam building, India ranks third in the world after the United States as well as China. So, primarily these dams were built for the flood control, for water supply and for hydroelectric power generation as well as irrigation for the people. Most of the irrigation dams in India are the embankment dams, and they consist of a wall built across a river valley to impound water to form a reservoir upstream, and a system of spillways and gates to bypass the wall to maintain a normal river flow and convey water to a network of canals feeding irrigated regions downstream. The upstream areas that are fed by the dam and those which are submerged by its reservoir, they make up the catchment area, and the downstream areas that are fed by the irrigation canals, that makes up its command area. So, these two are important, the catchment as well as the command area. In fact, in large dam construction, this has been the main form of investment in irrigation that has been undertaken by the Indian government. But from the 1980s, the public investment in the large dams in India was a subject of a sustained controversy, and that centered the balance between social, environmental and the economic aspects. The dams have resulted in the loss of biodiversity, deforestation and a higher incidence of natural disasters like floods, landslides, seismically induced earthquakes and related socio-economic problems. Various river valley projects like that of the Sardar Sarovar Dam, and that was built on the river Narmada. It was aimed at providing electricity, drinking water and Gujarat for irrigation to the states of Maharashtra, Gujarat and Madhya Pradesh. And here this project, it displaced and uprooted more than 1 million tribal people from 570 villages, and that was a real socio-economic problem. And that led Ms. Medha Patekar, who is an environmental activist, and she sat on dharnas and strikes and even fast, for quite a number of time for taking up this issue. So, such is the importance of the socio-economic aspects when the dams are built like this. Hydroelectricity. So, let us come to the topic. Electricity that is basically produced from the hydropower. In 2015, the hydropower generated almost 16% of the world's total electricity and 70% of all the renewable electricity. Hydroelectricity is the electricity made by generators that are pushed by the movement of the water. So, it is usually made with dams that block a river to make a reservoir or collect water that is pumped there. So, we have already discussed how the dams are constructed and how the hydropower also can be generated. When the water is released, the pressure behind the dam forces the water down pipes that lead to a turbine. In India, like for example, we have large amount is hydroelectricity, and we also have the thermal power plants. Now, in the hydroelectricity, this is low, and it makes it as a very good source of the renewable electricity. In many other places nuclear electricity is also used, and the hydro station, this is good in one fact because it consumes no water unlike coal or in the gas plant, and with a dam and a reservoir it is also a flexible source of the electricity because the amount that is produced by the station can be varied up and down rapidly in order to adapt to the changing energy demands. Once this complex is constructed, a hydroelectric complex is constructed, then the project will produce no direct waste and it has a considerably lower output level of the greenhouse gases than the photovoltaic power plant and the fossil fuel powered energy plants. When these are constructed in the lowland rainforest areas, then inundation of a part of the forest is necessary, and they can emit the substantial amounts of the greenhouse gases contributing to climate change. So, the construction of these hydroelectric complexes, they can cause significant environmental impacts principally in the loss of arable land and the population displacement. They can disrupt the natural ecology of the river involved inhabiting the habitats and the ecosystem in that area, and they can affect the siltation and also the erosion patterns. The dam constructions, while they can ameliorate the risk of flooding, they also contain a risk of dam failure, and that can also sometimes prove to be catastrophic. So, what are the positive impacts of the hydroelectricity? They are immune to the variation in the cost of fossil fuels like oil, coal or the natural gas. It is a renewable source of energy. It is a clean source of power, and even remote areas, in there also you can provide the electricity. There is improvement in the living standards, employment opportunities are given to many, and there is also a creation of a reservoir. Now, in the EIA studies, basically the background of the project has to be understood. Methodologies have to be described and outlined. The detailed baseline studies have to be conducted. Physiography of the area, hydrometeorology, that is the soil characteristics, geology of the area, the bedrock characteristics, and the seismicity, whether it is seismic prone area, that also needs to be described. The land use and the land cover types, floristic and the forest types, all this have to be written clearly in the project which is submitted. Then the faunal elements, aquatic ecology and the fisheries, impact assessment and evaluation of the same has to be described. Then whether there can be any impact on the aquatic ecosystem, whether there will be any change in the land use and habitat destruction, location of the various structures, species population loss, will that be affected due to these hydroelectric power projects. Let us now take the impacts on the aquatic ecosystem. The construction of a dam, this will lead to the formation of lacustrine or semi-lacustrine body on the upstream areas. It will lead to the formation of algae, and that can lead to eutrophication of the reservoir. Then the dam can act as an obstruction for the fish migration. Deterioration of the water quality will proceed. So, that will be some impacts on the aquatic ecosystem. Then there can be runoff of the loose muck, then effluents from the crushers, sewage disposal from the labor colonies, that is those people who are working in the project, though they will be making some temporary camps and shelters. So, from there also the sewage disposal can come. Then the activities such as bathing, then cooking and drinking will have the negative impact. In the same way, untreated sewage, that also can be disposed in the river, and it will lead to increase in the organic content of that river. In the same way, impact on the air environment. So, the vehicular movement that are needed for the drilling, for the tunneling and for the digging purposes. All these are the infrastructures that come along with the project, and these mechanized machinery will have a lot of movement, and they will also emit lot of the air pollutants. Then they use the diesel generators to supply the electricity. There can be emissions of the nitrogen oxides, the sulfur dioxides, production of carbon dioxide and methane due to the decomposition of the organic matter, and also from the primary processes. All this will impact the air quality and the air environment. Noise pollution. There will be the construction activities. Older people, the young people are highly sensitive to the receivers. When there is blasting, lot of noise will be generated. So, the noise can actually trigger high blood pressure, and when consistently every day such kind of high noise levels are coming, then they can get also affected with the cardiovascular diseases, then they can have sleep disorders and so on. So, noise pollution is also a very important factor and outcome of the hydropower company and project activities. Then whenever any EIA assessment is being done, the tools and techniques that are going to be used also need to be analyzed. So, what are the maps and the overlays that is going to be used, any network diagram to be used, matrices that are going to be used, this needs to be described. Based on the project details, then the baseline environmental status. the potential impacts as a result of the construction and operation of the proposed hydroelectric project can be identified. So, the EIA for quite a few disciplines is subjective in nature and this cannot be quantified, but wherever possible the impacts can also be quantified, and otherwise the qualitative assessment can be undertaken. The anticipated positive as well as the negative impacts of the proposed project, this has been enumerated both during the construction and the operation phases in the many of the hydropower projects. So, the construction and operation phase, this will comprise of the various activities and each of them will likely to have different impacts on the environment. Thus, it is important to understand and analyze each activity and to assess the individual impacts on the environment. The key activities have been categorized for the construction and the operation phases, and that is what we described in the earlier slides. Now, in the construction phases, you need to include the site preparation, the excavation details, construction of various structures like for example new roads, bridges, offices, colonies for the workers, diversion of the river water, disposal of effluents, because whenever any construction activity is going to take place, and that may take place for years, it can even go on up to 1 year or even more than a year or 2 years. So, in that case the normal working activity for the people or the residents should not be affected, or the offices should not be affected. So, the diversion plans and new roads and bridges also need to be construction. These activities also need to be described in that project. Operation phase activities. This will be regarding the maintenance of the equipment, disposal of the sewage and the effluents, mushrooming of the allied activities, impact on the different environments. All this we can detail them in the following categories. So, they can be the impacts on the water environment specifically, on the air environment, on the noise environment, on the land environment, on the biological environment, and impacts on the socio-economic environment. So, these need to be written down in the project proposal. Then, if we have to take the water environment, we need to describe the water quality, the sediments presently there and what will be generated as a result of the activity, water resources and the downstream users who are using this resource. Then, in the construction phase, maybe the major sources of the water pollution, it can be the sewage from the labor camp, from the crushers, the pollution due to the muck disposal, and also from the other sources. Operation phase, you can have it from the project colonies, from the reservoir water quality, eutrophication risk, and also the sediments. Air environment, during the construction and operation, generally there will be a lot of the air emissions that are coming out, even the particulate matter which can actually obstruct the lungs and the respiratory system. In the construction phase, the pollution due to the fuel combustion in the various equipments, that can also impact the air quality. So, this could be from the crushers, then from the various sources, blasting operation, pollution due to increased vehicular movement, dust emission from the muck disposal, and then during the operation phase also particulate matter due to vehicular movement and from the dust disposal. All this can be certain places and sources for the emissions. Impacts on the noise environment. Here again, during the construction phase, the noise levels will be expected during the construction phase due to the earth moving machinery, and otherwise it is due to the quarrying, to the blasting, to the vehicular movement, that can also have the impacts, adverse impacts on the ambient noise levels in that area. In the same way, impacts on the land environment. So, the land impacts also have to be assessed during the construction and the operation phases. So, maybe the anticipated impacts on the land are due to the quarrying operation, operation of the construction equipment, soil erosion, muck disposal, acquisition of the land. Now, on the biological diversity may also be impacted due to the river projects. So, that can be impacts on the terrestrial flora, on the terrestrial fauna, and both on the aquatic flora as well as the fauna. Operation phase. Here in this phase also there can be like illegal logging, there can be human interference in the collection of the non-timber forest produce, then there can be change in the riverine ecology due to changes in the flow patterns, impacts due to discharge of sewage from the labor camp and colonies, impacts due to human activities, impacts on migratory fish species, then the impacts due to land acquisition. So, in case the large areas are necessary, land acquisition will be inevitable and rehabilitation has to be provided for all the displaced villagers. Impacts on the cultural, religious and historical monuments. So, whether there is any historical or archaeological importance, there are any monuments, will that be impacted due to this project? Increased incidence of the water related disease, like for example breeding of the vector, aggregation of the labor and excavation. So, the water related disease incidences also should be noted down. Impact on the geological environment. Now, since the project can exert the pressure on the land below, a thorough study of the rocks in that upstream area, the central and the downstream areas of the project, this also has to be carried out. So, dear viewers and learners, I hope you have had a good understanding of the environmental impact assessment which has to be done on a hydroelectric project which is submitted, and we have described all the various possibilities that have to be evaluated. For example, starting with the baseline studies, that is presently, you know, or at that time, what is the status of the environment, then all the geological details of the area, the soil details, the topography, and the type of activities that are going to be carried out, the type of machinery or the equipments that will be used, and the impacts, likely impacts that will be caused on the noise levels, then on the land environment, on the air quality, on the water quality, on the vegetation, and also if there are any cultural or religious sites of importance, whether that will be affected. So, all these need to be noted down carefully, and using the methodology like maybe checklist and matrices and certain other statistical tools, the EIA report is submitted by various NGOs and also certain government agencies, and they also need to take down the legal aspects also into account. So, this has to be done in order to provide the clearance and then starting of the project in the proper way. Thank you for your patient listening.